The council chamber fell silent as the holographic display flickered to life. Ambassador Vexnar of the Killerian Collective stood at the center of the room, his four arms crossed in what his species considered deep thought. Around him sat the representatives of 12 galactic civilizations, all gathered for one purpose: to decide whether humanity should be granted membership in the Galactic Council. "I have completed my study of the human historical archives," Vexnar announced, his voice carrying the soft clicks that marked Killerian speech. "And I must tell you all something that has troubled me greatly." Elder Moritha of the Venn Sisterhood leaned forward, her silvery skin catching the light of distant stars through the viewport. "What have you found, Ambassador? Are the humans dangerous?" Vexnar made a sound that translated roughly as confused laughter. "Dangerous, perhaps, but that is not what concerns me. What concerns me is that their history is impossible." The chamber erupted in quiet murmurs. The Galactic Council had seen many things in its 50,000 years of existence. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. They had watched stars die and new ones be born, but never had they heard a history described as impossible. "Explain yourself," commanded High Chancellor Drekmal, the ancient leader of the Brockthar Dominion. His massive frame shifted in his specially designed seat. Vexnar gestured to the display and images began to appear. "The humans claim they reached the stars alone. They say they developed technology, built civilization, and conquered their world without help from any outside force. They insist that on their entire planet, across all their history, they were the only intelligent species." "That is common enough," Elder Moritha said with a dismissive wave. "Many worlds produce only one dominant species." "You misunderstand me," Vexnar replied. "It is not that they were the only dominant species. It is that they survived being the only one. Every known civilization in our records, every single one, required the presence of a companion species to reach the stars. The Killerians had the Veth. The Ven had their keepers. The Brockthar rose alongside the Minfolk. This is how civilizations survive. One species alone cannot handle the psychological burden of existence. They go mad. They destroy themselves." The chamber fell quiet again, but this time the silence was heavier. High Chancellor Drekmal spoke slowly. "You are saying that humans should not exist." "I am saying that humans should not have survived," Vexnar corrected. "Look at their history." He gestured again, and the display changed to show images that made several ambassadors look away. "They have engaged in constant warfare. They have killed each other in numbers that defy understanding. They have created weapons capable of ending all life on their world. They have poisoned their own air, water, and soil." The images continued, each one more disturbing than the last. Mass graves, burning cities, mushroom clouds rising over flattened landscapes. "Any civilization exhibiting these behaviors would collapse within a few generations," Vexnar continued. "This is what happens when a species is alone. They turn on themselves. They lack the balance that a companion species provides. And yet," he paused, his four arms spreading wide in confusion, "and yet the humans are here. They survived. They reached the stars." Ambassador Yanel of the Crystalline Mind spoke for the first time, her voice like wind chimes. "Perhaps their records are false. Perhaps they had help and simply do not remember." "I considered that," Vexnar admitted. "But their archaeological evidence is consistent. Their genetic record shows no signs of outside intervention. Their technology developed along natural lines. By every measure we have, the humans did what they claim." "Then how?" Elder Moritha asked. Vexnar was silent for a long moment. "I do not know. That is why I have asked for this special session. We need to study the humans more closely before we make any decision about membership." Far below the council chamber, in the visitor quarters, a human woman named Dr. Sarah Chen was preparing for the most important presentation of her life. She had been chosen to represent humanity before the Galactic Council. Sarah was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair. She had been a historian before becoming a diplomat, and she had spent her entire career studying how societies rise and fall. Her assistant, a young man named Marcus, entered her quarters with a worried expression. "Dr. Chen, I've been monitoring the Council's communications. They're questioning whether our history is real. One of the ambassadors thinks we shouldn't exist." Sarah stopped what she was doing. "Shouldn't exist." "He says no species survives alone. He says we should have destroyed ourselves long ago." Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she began to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had seen too much history. "He's not wrong to be confused," she said. "There were times when I studied history and wondered the same thing. How did we make it?" She shook her head. "But we are here, Marcus. Against all odds, we survived. And tomorrow I'm going to have to explain how." "Do you know how?" Marcus asked. Sarah looked out the window at the stars. "I think I do, but I'm not sure they'll believe me." The first day of the formal hearings began with ceremonies that humanity's representatives barely understood. Ancient words were spoken in languages that no longer had native speakers. Lights were dimmed and brightened. A small flame was lit and extinguished. When the ceremonies were complete, High Chancellor Drechmel addressed the human delegation. "Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth, before we hear your petition, Ambassador Vexnar has raised concerns that must be addressed." Vexnar rose from his seat. "Dr. Chen, I have studied your species' history extensively. I have examined your wars, your disasters, your periods of darkness, and I have one question that demands an answer." Sarah stood straight. "Ask your question, Ambassador." "How did you survive alone?" The chamber was absolutely silent. Sarah took a deep breath. "That is a question I have asked myself many times, and I believe the answer will take more than a few words, but I will try to explain." Drechmel nodded. "You may speak, we will listen." Sarah began by asking for patience. "To understand how humanity survived, you must first understand what we faced. I do not think any of you truly comprehend how alone we were." An image of Earth appeared on the display. "This is our home, and on this world we evolved alongside millions of other species, animals, plants, insects, but none of them could talk to us. None of them could understand us. None of them could share our burden." Ambassador Yinel made a sound of confusion. "But you said there were millions of species. Surely some of them." "No," Sarah cut in firmly. "None of them. We had creatures we loved, animals that lived in our homes, but they could not speak, they could not reason, they could not understand our fears or share our dreams." She let that sink in. Can you imagine that, being the only creature on an entire planet that can think? The chamber was quiet. Sarah could see the representatives trying to imagine it and failing. "Let me tell you about the first great crisis of human civilization," she continued. "Roughly 70,000 years ago, our species nearly went extinct. A massive volcanic eruption, perhaps, a change in climate. Our population dropped to perhaps 10,000 individuals." 10,000, Elder Moritha whispered. "We don't know exactly how many. What matters is that we should have died. With those numbers, with that level of technology, extinction was nearly certain." Sarah's voice was steady. "But we didn't die. Small groups of humans, separated by vast distances, chose to keep going. They hunted, they gathered, they protected their young, and slowly, over thousands of years, we grew again." She changed the display to show the spread of human civilization. But that was only the first crisis. There would be many more. High Chancellor Drechmel raised one massive hand. "Dr. Chen, you are telling us that your species repeatedly came to the edge of destruction. What we need to understand is how you survived each time." Sarah nodded. "First, you need to understand the scale of what we faced." She brought up images of disasters, the fall of Rome, the Black Death, the World Wars. In the 20th century alone, we killed over 100 million of our own kind through war and genocide. We developed weapons that could destroy all life on our planet. We came within minutes of using them on several occasions. Vexnar leaned forward. This is exactly what I was saying. This is the behavior of a species tearing itself apart. And yet we did survive, Sarah replied. The question is how, she paused. The answer, Ambassador, is complicated, but I will try to simplify it. The display showed a single human standing alone on a vast plain. Humans are social creatures. We evolved to live in groups to depend on each other. When we are alone, truly alone, we do not do well. Our minds need connection. This is a weakness. But it is also our greatest strength. The display changed to show humans working together. Because our need for connection drives us to create it. When we have no companion species to share our burden, we create companions within our own species. We form families. We build communities. We establish nations. Sarah stepped closer to the council members. You have companion species to help you maintain balance. You have other minds to share your fears. We do not have that, so we created something else. We created stories. The display filled with images of human art, literature, music. Stories that told us who we were. Stories that warned us of what we could become. We created heroes to inspire us and villains to remind us of our capacity for evil. We created entire worlds of imagination. Elder Moritha raised her hand. You are saying that you replaced a companion species with fiction. I am saying we replaced it with stories, traditions, laws, and ideas, Sarah corrected. Real things built from imagination but no less powerful. When our governments failed, we created new ones. When our religions lost their meaning, we found new sources of purpose. We were constantly adapting, constantly rebuilding. But we also fought, she admitted. Constantly. Without an external companion species to absorb our aggression, we had only ourselves to fight, and so we fought, over resources, over beliefs, over ancient grudges. She took a deep breath. That is the dark side of our survival. We survived not by being peaceful but by being relentless. When one group fell, another rose. When one civilization destroyed itself, its survivors built something new. We are a species that kept moving even when we lost our balance, stumbling forward through sheer stubborn refusal to die. Vexnar shook his head. That should not work. A species that fights itself as much as you do should extinct itself within a few thousand years. You're right, Sarah said. By your mathematics, we should not exist, but there is a factor your mathematics did not account for. What factor? Sarah smiled, but there was no joy in it. Hope. The word hung in the air of the council chamber. Hope, Vexnar repeated, his tone skeptical. You are telling me that your species survived extinction through hope. Sarah shook her head. Not hope alone. Hope combined with something else. Something your species have never needed to develop. She brought up an image of a human figure alone in a vast desert, walking toward a distant horizon. On Earth, there is an old story about a man who crosses a desert. He has no water, no food. By all logical measures, he should lie down and die, but he does not. He keeps walking, and when asked why, he says, because there might be something beyond the next dune. That is irrational, Ambassador Yainel observed. Yes, Sarah agreed. And yet that irrationality has saved us more times than I can count. She changed the display to show scenes of human perseverance, explorers crossing frozen wastelands, scientists working through the night, parents protecting their children against impossible odds. Humans have an ability to believe in possibilities that do not yet exist. We can imagine futures that seem impossible and then work toward them. This is not a rational process, but it is real. High Chancellor Drekmal rumbled thoughtfully. You speak of delusion. Sometimes, yes, Sarah admitted. Sometimes our hope is delusional, but sometimes our hope creates the truth it imagines. She searched for the right words. When one human believes something is possible, that changes nothing. but when 1 million believe it, they can make it true. She brought up historical examples. There was a time when humans believed that slavery was natural. Then some began to believe it was wrong. That belief spread slowly against massive resistance. People died for that belief. But eventually, slavery was abolished in most of our world, not because economics supported it, but because enough people believed it should be abolished. The same pattern repeats throughout our history, she continued. Democracy, human rights, scientific progress, each began as an impossible idea. Each was opposed by powerful forces, and each eventually became reality because enough people believed it could. Vexnar's 4 arms moved in patterns that suggested deep thought. You are describing a kind of collective delusion that becomes functional. I am describing the power of shared stories, Sarah corrected. Those stories gave us shared beliefs, shared values, shared hopes, and when enough of us share a hope, we can move mountains to make it real. Elder Moritha leaned forward. You are saying that your species creates reality through consensus belief. Not physical reality, Sarah clarified, but social reality, yes. The structure of our societies, the rules by which we live, these are created by consensus belief. And that consensus has allowed us to change, to adapt, to rebuild ourselves when other approaches failed. She showed the aftermath of the world wars, the reconstruction of destroyed cities. After our worst conflicts, we did not simply rebuild. We created new structures designed to prevent the same disasters. International law, human rights declarations. These were not perfect. They failed many times, but they represented our attempt to learn from our mistakes. And this worked, Drekmal asked, clearly doubtful. Well enough, Sarah replied. We have not had a global war in almost a century. We have lifted billions out of poverty. We have reached the stars. She gestured at the chamber. We are here, Chancellor. That is proof that something worked. Finally, Ambassador Yanel spoke. Dr. Chen, how did this capacity survive your conflicts? How did your wars not destroy the shared beliefs that held you together? Sarah nodded slowly. The truth is, we often didn't maintain shared beliefs. Wars destroyed them. Empires collapsed and their values were forgotten. The history of humanity is littered with dead ideas. Then how? Yanel pressed. Because we had something that could not be destroyed by war, Sarah said. We had children. The display showed images of human children throughout history. Children playing in ancient ruins. Children being taught in wartime schools. Children are born with no knowledge of the conflicts that divided their parents, Sarah explained. They come into the world with no hatred, no grudges. They are empty vessels waiting to be filled. And that means that every generation, humanity gets a chance to start over. This is how we survived our worst moments. Even when we destroyed ourselves, we could not destroy the next generation. And that next generation could choose to be different. They could look at the ruins left by their parents and say, we will build something better. Vexnar made a sound of frustrated understanding. You are describing a system that survives through constant regeneration. Yes, Sarah agreed. Humanity is not a stable system. We are a chaotic system that survives through constant adaptation. We break down and rebuild. We fail and try again. It is messy. It is painful, but it works. She turned to face the full council. You wanted to know how we survived alone. We survived through hope, through stories, through children, and through stubbornness that defies all rational calculation. We survived because no matter how many times we fell, some of us always got back up. The council called a recess. As the representatives withdrew to discuss, Sarah found herself standing alone by the great viewport. Ambassador Vexnar approached her. Dr. Chen, may I speak with you? Sarah turned to face him. What would you like to discuss? Vexnar's 4 arms folded and unfolded. I have been studying your species for 3 years. I have read your histories, analyzed your data, and I still do not understand you. That's fair, Sarah replied. Most humans don't understand themselves. Everything I know says that you should not exist, and yet you do. You reached the stars. You developed artificial intelligence, all while being alone. Not all while being alone, Sarah corrected. We had each other. But you used that to kill each other, Vexnar pressed. How can the same species that commits genocide also produce scientists and artists? Sarah thought carefully. Ambassador, we are not one species in the way you mean. We are billions of individuals, each with their own beliefs, their own capacity for good and evil. When you see cruelty in our history, you are seeing what some humans chose. When you see creativity, you are seeing what others chose. Sometimes the same humans choose both. That sounds like chaos, Vexnar observed. It is chaos, Sarah agreed. But it is also freedom. We are free to be anything, which means we are free to be terrible, but also free to be wonderful. Vexnar was silent for a long moment. My species has always had the Veth. They balance us. Together, we have endured for 40,000 years without a single internal war. That sounds peaceful, Sarah said. It is peaceful, Vexnar agreed. But sometimes I wonder what we might have created without them. What we might have become if we had been forced to find our own balance. He turned to look at the stars. The council is divided. Some fear you, but others believe you might have something to teach us. What are you saying, Ambassador? I will speak in favor of your admission, not because I believe you are safe. I do not think you are safe. You are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered, but I believe that danger can also be a gift. The final session was different from the previous ones. The questions were less skeptical, more curious. High Chancellor Drechmel spoke first. Dr. Chen, you have explained how humanity survived its past, but what does humanity intend for its future? Sarah had prepared for this question. Chancellor, humanity has always been defined by its aspirations. We do not know what we will become, but I can tell you what we hope to become. She stepped forward. We hope to become better, better than we were yesterday, better than we are today. We hope to learn from every species we encounter. We hope to share what we have learned, the hard lessons of surviving alone. We also hope to contribute, she continued. Humanity has faced challenges that no other species has faced. We have developed solutions that no other species would have imagined. We do not claim our solutions are always good, but we believe they might be useful. Drechmel nodded slowly. These are good words, but how can we trust that humanity will live up to them? Sarah smiled sadly. You can't, Chancellor. Trust is something that must be earned over time. We can only ask for the chance to show you. She looked around the chamber. Humanity is not perfect. We never will be, but we are always trying. That is who we are. We must always try to be better, because if we stop trying, we fall back into darkness. Give us a chance, she said simply. That is all we ask. The chamber was silent. Then Vexnar rose from his seat. I move to admit humanity to the Galactic Council as a provisional member, subject to a 100-year review period. Elder Moritha rose next. I second the motion. One by one, other representatives rose. When the final count was taken, the motion passed by a margin of 8-4. High Chancellor Drechmel turned to Sarah. Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth, your species has been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. May you prove worthy of the trust we have placed in you. Sarah bowed her head. We will try, Chancellor. That is what humans do. 300 years passed. When the Council convened for humanity's third centennial review, the chamber was filled with species that had not been present at that first hearing. The current human representative was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, great-great-granddaughter of one of the first human diplomats. She stood where Sarah Chen had once stood. Distinguished members of the Council, Yuki began, we are here for humanity's 300-year review. The holographic display, showed the story of humanity's first 3 centuries in the galactic community. Human researchers have contributed to over 4,000 joint research projects. We have established over 200 cultural exchange programs. And most significantly, humanity has not engaged in any major internal conflict during this period. We remain imperfect, but we have not repeated the great wars of our past. Ambassador Kethnar, descendant of Vexnar, rose to speak. Dr. Tanaka, the Council acknowledges humanity's progress, but your species has expanded rapidly, colonizing more worlds than any other species in Council history. Some fear humanity is becoming too powerful. Yuki nodded calmly. I understand those concerns. We are still driven by the same forces that propelled us through our isolated history, but consider what we have done with that ambition. We have colonized many worlds openly, following Council guidelines. We have shared technologies freely. We have influenced other civilizations through culture and cooperation, not force. We are still the same species that stood before this Council 300 years ago, she continued. We have not abandoned our nature, but we have found new ways to express it. Elder the Raxus of the Venn Sisterhood spoke next. Dr. Tanaka, my predecessor asked your predecessor 3 centuries ago, how do we know we can trust humanity? Yuki smiled. Dr. Chen said that trust must be earned over time. 300 years have passed. We have had our chance. The question is whether we have earned that trust. I believe we have, but that judgment is not mine to make. High Chancellor Drechmel, now ancient beyond measure, rose from his seat. The Council has reviewed humanity's record extensively. 300 years ago, my predecessor expressed doubt about admitting humanity. He was not wrong to doubt. You are still the most unpredictable species we have ever encountered. Yuki felt her heart sink. But you are also something else, Drechmel continued. You are proof that there is more than one way to build a civilization. You are evidence that beings can survive terrible darkness and emerge into light. You are hope. He straightened to his full height. The Galactic Council hereby confirms humanity's full membership. You are no longer provisional. You are one of us. The chamber erupted in applause. Yuki felt tears streaming down her face. Ambassador Kethnar approached her after the ceremony. My ancestor was the one who first advocated for humanity's admission. He spent the rest of his life trying to understand your species. He never succeeded. Yuki laughed. Neither have we, Ambassador. Kethnar's 4 arms moved in amusement. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the fact that you do not understand yourselves is what allows you to keep changing. We know exactly who we are, and so we remain the same. You do not know who you are, and so you become something new with every generation. That sounds about right, Yuki admitted. It is terrifying, Kethnar said, and also wonderful. I look forward to seeing what you become next. As Yuki left the council chamber, she paused at the great viewport. She thought of that old story Sarah Chen had told about the man crossing the desert. He kept walking because there might be something beyond the next dune. And there was. There always was. The stars stretched out before her, infinite and full of possibility. And humanity, the species that had survived alone, was finally ready to explore them together with the rest of the galaxy. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. And for humanity, that had always been the best kind of story.